Syntakt just got some new update, and in this video I want to create some beat featuring some of the new things. For example, 4 new sounds which are all analog: a kick, a snare, a hi-hat and a synth, which is great because we can make some beat using only those 4 things, great for exploring them. And also there's a new sequencer, like a Euclidean sequencer, that helps you find cool rhythms because it can generate rhythmic ideas for you, and you can either use it as a starting point or also consider using it in some sort of performance recording situation because there's some generative stuff you can do with it. And my name is Janis, and let's jump right into it. I want to start with the new synth engine, which you can use in many different ways, and I also feel like it's the most significant addition to the existing ones. So it's called Synth Chip, and the default sound is this weird glitchy something where you can also change the other tones, because here you have some dedicated control for the intervals. So if they are all on like small amounts, you get some closer sound, or you can also use octaves, for example, or maybe here a fifth for larger intervals, so you can refine how it sounds. And you can also make it longer and change the speed. So if you select some higher speed, you get some distortion, which is great for those short tribal percussion hits. Oh, this is too fast. And also, speaking about those short percussion hits, it's great to experiment with the waveforms, because this one has many new waveforms that didn't exist before on the Syntakt. I mean, now it's on a standard waveform, but you have, for example, those. At this point, I don't know what it stands for. And there are some more that have some noise in the beginning. You see it here with this noise graphic. So they give you some additional impulse, which is also great for everything percussive. Or anything industrial. And while you can make it sound super distorted, you can also use it as some arpeggiator, and this is probably my favorite way of using it. So let's pick something simple like a triangle wave, and if you increase the decay, you get some ongoing sound. Also great for industrial, actually, this type of sound color. But if you change the speed, at some point you get some rhythmic units. So for example, this is like quarter notes, 8th notes, or 16th notes. And let's check out 16th notes. So now you see, we get some arpeggio. And you can refine the intervals. For example, I think I like to have like a 3/7, like a 3rd, 5th, and also like a 9th. There's a little glitch in the beginning, so I'm going to increase the attack a little, so it sounds a bit smoother. And actually, let's add some reverb. I think it will definitely benefit from some reverb. Also, I always like those long reverbs. I don't know, maybe they are a bit cheesy, but I just enjoy the Syntakt reverb for those longer sounds. And I was also thinking, maybe we can do something fun with the LFO, because if you have like a square wave, it always changes between 2 values. And if you change the depth to 12, it's some octave. So maybe it does some interesting things to the sequence, because I personally really like this effect of having some octave sometimes, not always at the same time, on a sequence, because it makes it sound a bit more musical, a bit more open, a bit less static. So let's actually see what this does to the, in this case, let's use the interval 2 or 3. Probably it sounds cool when it's not synced as well. You can get some cool glitch sounds. Quite some cool options here. I'm going to sync it though, and maybe we can do something fun with the other LFO, modulating the first LFO, like for example the multiplier. So let's maybe switch this to 2. Here we're going to select the random one, and now we just mess a bit with the time. Ooh. So it doesn't sound as static as with this default setting, but I somehow really like this option for having like a arpeggiator like this, because if we use keyboard mode, we can now create some little melodies where it always plays the sequence or this kind of arpeggio from another root note. I don't like those glitches. I guess we can also change the amplitude envelope retrigger. That's often the cause for those weird glitches if it's not like the attack. Maybe you also stumble upon those sometimes. So I find this super cool. Let's maybe add a little bit of filtering so to see if we can make it sound a little more interesting. Let's continue with the kick drum, which is called kick acoustic or bass drum acoustic. And as the name suggests, it actually sounds more acoustic. So you get more of the kind of drum head character instead of the thick bass that is really artificial and comes from the electronic sound or the synthesized sound. But I actually like it because you can also get the bass and get a combination of both. The impact can make it even more punchy, although here it's a bit too much for my taste. I always like those kicks with overdrive. So don't even have to do so much. I think this is a setting we can work with. And now we can check out this new sequencer, the Euclidean Sequencer, and you need to press trig once and then a second time to access it. And it looks like this. And the only thing you need to do is to enable it. And while there's a lot of theory behind it and you can explain things mathematically, you don't need to. I feel like it's a great tool where all you need to know is that you need to move the upper left knob for simply creating rhythms, because that's the first goal, I think. And the higher the number, the more pulses you get. So here you get all pulses. And right now it's synced to the pattern length because I think I have a global pattern length. If you have some individual track length, for example now 16 for this track, you can also change the pattern length here with this length control, which is cool because you can also use any number. So if you choose 15, it's going to overlap over time, for example, or it could also be like 7. And you can do quite funky things here. I'm going to leave it at 16 for now. Maybe we can try this later. And now I can also see that the maximum value for the pulse 1 is 16, so it depends on the pattern length. If this is like a higher number, you can also change the pulses because you can have the same amount of pulses as you have steps per sequence. And the sequencer has different modes, which you can see on the lower right side. This is the first mode. It's called, what's the name? Operator OR. It basically means that you only need the first control here for creating your rhythm. And then you can also rotate it with this control here, R1. So if we create a rhythm, we can rotate it one position to the left, for example, or even further, or also to the right. So it basically moves your sequence. Actually, if you open the sequence menu, I actually didn't tell you that. You can actually see what happens. So here you see all the steps that get created or get taken away. And also with the rotation, you then see that it moves to the right or to the left. So it's pretty visual. And now we're going to explore the other modes. I don't know how well I can explain it. I also try to be quick because I don't want this video to be like super theoretical. So the second mode, it's called like XOR, means that now the second pulse actually matters. So we can create a first pulse and it's kind of a good example to use all 16 triggers. So we have like 16th notes in the kick drum. And now we can create a second pulse, and it's going to overlap with the first pulse at some position. So you can see it here with those yellow pads flashing up. And where it overlaps, we don't have a sound. So now it overlaps on the 1, for example, on the 9, on the 4, and the 12, and there will be no sound. Also on the 7 and 15. So the higher the number, the less triggers you get. So that's another way of creating rhythms. You can also rotate this with R2, and the track rotation is for the whole sequence, because if you use both, you create like a whole rhythm based on 2 pulses, and then instead of moving them individually, you can also move the whole pattern. Then the next mode is basically the opposite. So it's the AND mode, which means that we hear all notes that actually overlap. So before, the overlapped notes were taken away, and here we hear all the overlapping notes. So let's start again with 16 triggers. Which means now we don't hear anything because there's no overlap, so we need to increase the second value to actually create some overlap. And there's one more mode which basically subtracts the second pulse from the first one. So if we again start with 16 triggers, you will see if we move this to 1, it will remove 1 trigger, 2 will remove 2 triggers, and so on. That's a cool rhythm. Maybe we can rotate it so it's starting on the 1. I like this one. And so once your sequence is running, you can simply move those knobs and see how it affects the sound. Again, I'm more of like a live musician, a playing musician, where, I don't know, I understand those systems, but I don't integrate them into my thinking. I basically just move knobs and react spontaneously to what happens. But I think if you're like some more mathematical brain, you can come up with some quite complex rhythmic structures here. By the way, in case you enjoyed this video and also feel like supporting the channel, you can take a quick second to click the like button, and also be warmly invited to subscribe, because you can find videos about Syntakt on my channel, but also about any other music production related topic. And also I have a website where I offer some online classes, sound packs, and you can also book me for some one-on-one. So be warmly invited to check that out as well. But for now, let's move on to the snare. So here we get the snare drum acoustic, which again sounds quite acoustic. Oh. It has a strong impact, which makes it sound more like a rim click shot something, which can be super cool. It also, I feel like those two sounds, the bass drum natural and the snare natural, help you to get more of a sampled character, because they don't sound purely synthesized. So that's a cool thing you can do here. And I guess the menu is kind of self-explanatory, since it's the same as with all those other snare or kick drum engines. Sometimes for snares, I like to use bandpass filters. I don't know, I have a feeling it could sound cool here. Maybe more drive. Maybe we can also filter the kick drum a little, so we don't have like the full sound and everything has like more of a sampled character. And now for the snare, we can do exactly the same thing as we were doing with the kick drum, because we can open the Euclidean Sequencer and basically create some rhythms and see if they create some cool interplay with the bass drum. Again, I think I will change this to 16 steps. I don't know why, but somehow it doesn't take much time here to find some cool rhythm, I feel. But again, I didn't think about it at all. I was just moving some knobs. And actually, it's a little too driven for my taste. Could also sound cool with some delay. Something like this. And I want to show you some fun approach for using the Euclidean sequencer in some more collaborative mode, because now we were creating sequences individually for kick and snare, which is fun, but you can also start by creating one rhythm that gets applied to all tracks, because the Syntakt, also Digitakt, have this amazing feature that you can hold down track, and whatever change you make here to a certain parameter gets applied to all tracks, in this case only kick and snare, because those are the two ones using the Euclidean mode. And if I, for example, hold this down, this is on 16, and we make sure that now they are exactly the same, we actually get exactly the same rhythm on both parts. Which, first of all, I don't know why. It sounds so cool to have the unison snare and kick part, I realize. It sounds pretty cool. But once you have like a cool first rhythm, you can then change, for example, to the snare drum and simply change the rotation. So it's a little off. So you have the same rhythmic idea, but shifted. Also, you can change the pattern length of the snare, making it more interesting. So you get more rhythmic overlap. And once you have those different layers of rhythms, it's really fun to actually modulate all sequences with things like rotation that are on 0 or pulse that are on 0. So you basically leave the main pulse, and the track rotation in this case could also be others. Actually, I'm going to sound a bit mathematical now. But then changing some other parts globally can change the overall sound a lot and create new patterns that give you this kind of generative feel. I can't really explain what's going to happen exactly, but let's actually play a bit with them. So at higher values, you create a lot of space. And here we are back at our initial pattern. So for me, it's like in the end, I always end up being spontaneous and not thinking about the mathematical relations. I think it's possible, but I just want to give you some ideas on how you can actually use it and how it can also interact with like multiple tracks. I find this to be super cool. And also another fun thing is that it's going to store this Euclidean sequence. So once you open the sequencer mode and disable it, you can also create your own sequence, maybe like this. And once you switch back to Euclidean, you're back in your Euclidean sequence. So you can basically see this as some control for changing between two completely different patterns, which is something I also need to explore, because I think for live performance this brings up super cool possibilities. So you have like one fixed sequence and then another one that just creates this variation, and you can use it for creating tension and suspense. And once you want to convert one sequence from the Euclidean sequencer that you like to the real sequencer, the grid, so you can tweak it further, also maybe with different pitches, you simply need to hold down function while you disable the Euclidean mode, and then you see you have the sequence here. And let's round this up by also checking out the hi-hat. So this is not the hi-hat. There's the HiHat Lab that actually sounds a bit like a lab, but it basically gives you 6 different oscillators that create your hi-hat sound. And in the beginning, they are all quite low. And then you can move them. And the more you move them to the right side, the higher kind of tones you get. I feel like there really isn't so much to say here, other than that you need to listen to it and need to see where you like the sound. I mean, if you move them all to the right side, you get a pretty high-pitched hi-hat sound. Also, it creates some interesting distortion, so I feel like you could also create some general cool percussion hits here. But again, it's pretty intuitive, and what I always like to do with hi-hats is that I maybe move everything to the middle, and then I pick 2 that get modulated with the random LFO on trigger mode. So let's say we use the second one. Oh, wrong button. Yes, and also for maybe oscillator 4, random LFO, it still needs to be used. You still need to increase the depth. And maybe it's even more obvious, so we used 2 and 4 now. If we move all the other oscillators, like the first one, the third one, and the 5th one, and the 6th one, to the left side. So, oh yeah. Some super amazing glitch sounds. So I think this is not only like a hi-hat generator, but also some sort of glitch generator. And I'm pretty sure it sounds super cool to create some rhythms for it. And here I feel like almost any rhythm is going to sound cool. So let's go to the sequencer, enable it, and basically have some fun. Filtering. And if it sounds too glitchy, you can maybe make it sound more like a hi-hat again. If we now make changes to the Euclidean sequencer while holding down track, we can shift everything. Oh, now we create lots of space. I mean, if you mess with all parameters, you mess with all your tracks, so it's going to be a little weird. And now, unfortunately, we have the kick drum and bass, snare again on the same position. But almost any variation sounds quite cool here. For the night, it's kind of cool to use some longer length, like 4 bars or 64 steps. Actually, it would sound probably cool to also just modulate the frequency a bit. And yeah, I hope you liked this little video. It was really spontaneous, which is something I usually don't do, but I saw this update and was like, oh wow, this is super cool. It's my first Syntakt real-time update because I've been using the Syntakt only for a couple of months. And if all Elektron updates are always like this, I'm really going to look forward for any of them. And if you like this little video, you can quickly hit the like button if you want to say thanks, and be also warmly invited to check out my other Syntakt videos. Here's a playlist, or here's another one with some more videos about music production in general and some cool tips and tricks. And apart from that, I wish you lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye.